Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Time Out for Anesthesia. We are going to continue now our onboarding series where we're going through a sample onboarding and kind of everything we do during the onboarding process, show a little bit of the magic of our platform and all the wonderful people that work with us. So today we have Dr. Zavaleta with us. He is our Chief Medical Officer. He is one of the co-founders of Graphium. So to say that this is in large part his brainchild is not an understatement. So to get us rolling here, I'm going to share my screen real quick and show where we kind of are back to the process. So, a couple of weeks ago, we did an onboarding review of kind of, 10,000 foot, what this really looks like, what an onboarding kickoff call is going to look like, what this info pack area looks like. And now we are on to this very crucial area here of form development, right? Each one of these things we'll go through with the client during our onboarding process, depending on what the needs are, of course. But there's always going to be a need for a form for the most part, and that is definitely where Dr. Zavaleta comes in here. So I will stop sharing my screen, and I'll let Dr. Zavaleta introduce himself and give us a little bit of his background. Go ahead, Dr.
Right. Yeah. Thanks, John. Let me see if I can share my screen. Here, how's that look?
That looks great.
That works.
That works.
Okay. Yeah. Well, thanks. So my goal right now is to give you an overview of how these forms work, and you'll immediately see out of the gate that it has a very paper-like experience, and that's by design. We feel like at Graphium that paper does have a lot of inherent values. The biggest downside of paper is that there's no ability to report off of it. It's very difficult to collect discrete data and share that with folks downstream. So who's downstream? Your billing department, the hospital, bean counters that need reports for certain functions, CMS and macro compliance. Everybody wants data that's collected on your form. And that's why we go electronic, right? To make this data more accessible, shareable, to offer intelligence while you're completing forms, like feedback on do things line up and make sense. And what we're trying to do at Graphium is marry that electronic functionality with a very slick paper-like experience. And so, as you know, our largest service, our Anesthesia EMR service, is on the iPad. And we use what you're seeing on screen is just what I have on my iPad, and I'm using my pencil. And so you'll see as I click in, we have these zoomable fields, and the entire user interface with this application and with these forms is driven with your iPad pencil. And so you'll see that immediately it looks familiar, really helps with training, especially folks that don't want to see tabs and drop down menus and anything that looks too computer-esque, if you will. You'll see at the very bottom, we have these little dots down here that indicates the number of pages on your form. And so you'll see this second one is darker, and there are 4 dots indicating we're on page 2 of 4. And you simply swipe to the left and you'll see page 3, and you swipe again and you'll see page 4. And so it is just like a packet of papers, if you will, that make up your quote anesthesia form. Up here in the upper right-hand corner, you'll see a plus sign. And so when you hit this plus sign, you'll see there are a variety of different additional pages that you can add to your form. And so if I want to add an English consent, then it will add that and it will introduce, and now you'll see there are 5 pages. And this is now page number 2. And here's your pre-op, your consent, and back to the primary page. And so we'll go over these additional pages that you can add in due time, very self-explanatory. But before we get to that, I want to show you how each of these pages actually works. And so a couple things to draw your attention to. You'll see that there are some red borders in certain areas, and those indicate our zoomable areas. And so if I just use my stylus and I click inside, and I click inside there, you'll see that it zooms in. And if I click anywhere outside of that box, it'll zoom back out. And so there are different areas of the form that I can bounce around in. And it's just intended to allow you to go in and see things that are a bit bigger, to engage with the form. And then when you're done, you can zoom back out and then see the whole page. The second thing you bring your attention to is you see a variety of these red fields. And the name of the game for all of our forms, if it's an OB form, a labor form, a short form, a brief form, we're looking right now at our general form, whatever the anesthesia form is, the name of the game is to get rid of all the red fields. And those red fields are intentionally designed to keep you kind of on the yellow brick road, so that you will always have a complete form at the end of the day. And when I say a complete form, it means the billing folks are going to be happy, the quality compliance folks are going to be happy, the folks in charge of offering analytic reports about your group's performances, they're going to be happy. So it's all different types of data are going to be on that form. And so as you start to fill these out, you'll see that let's just put in today's date. And if you hit in today, you'll see that it turns from red to yellow and we're off and running. You'll see that there's different fields here like anesthesia start, and if it'll pull up this component, and if you're doing it in real time, you can simply click on now. If you want to go back in time, so to speak, and say, well, actually, let's say I did this at 13:45, then you can hit this backspace just 3 times and then type in 13:45 and then click on accept. And then you'll see it puts 13:45 up here. You'll also see that it copies that same value in other fields that are important on the record. So we try to make this as fast as possible. And what you'll realize very quickly is this experience, even though it looks like paper, because of steps like this, where you can duplicate your data across the form anywhere, this becomes actually much faster than your original paper. When you throw templates on top of that, which we'll talk about in a second, it gets even faster. And so it's designed to be very quick and play a great role in very short cases, your eyeball cases, your ear tubes, your GI cases, anything that's less than 5 minutes, 10 minutes, you'll see that it's a very quick experience. You'll also see there's some intelligence built in these forms, so they're conditional. For example, here you'll see first case and scheduled start are both yellow, meaning that, when I zoom out, they're not red, so they're not required. But as soon as you click on first case and say, yes, that was a first case, then you'll see, okay, because you said this is a first case of the day, now I need to know the scheduled start time. And if you say, well, the scheduled start time is actually at 13:40 and you hit accept, then here you will see you were supposed to start at 13:40, but you actually started at 13:45, and the system will automatically track this as a first case delay, and specifically a case that was delayed by 5 minutes. And so that gives you an idea of why those fields are discrete and the types of reports that can come out of them. You put in anesthesia ready time, surgery start, surgery end, locations. These are what we call value sets, where you can scroll through and type, select any one that you want. You can put in ASA status and hit accept. Down for surgeons, you will see that there are a list of surgeons customized to each of your facilities. And so if we select one of those surgeons, the same for the anesthesiologist or the CRNAs. And so if you want to click on identify who that anesthesiologist is, it'll put in their name and then the last 5 digits of their NPI number. When you want to sign a chart, you just sign it like you would a normal sheet of paper. And if there are multiple people on the case, then you can select those additional people, and then they would sign the chart as they need to. This form is also asynchronous, and so anybody can enter in data at any time, right? So if you had a pre-assessment testing clinic and somebody came in 4 or 5 days or a week before the anesthetic, then your nurse practitioners could have open up these patients, open up and create a form and start completing this information, so that when you later came to the form, your pre-op page would be fully complete. You would just need to then focus on the consent and then on your primary page. And so there's no specific quote order for these films. Again, it's very much like a sheet of paper, like a form packet. Now, anybody from anywhere can access that form and enter in data, which makes it better than a physical sheet of paper. But there's nothing synchronous. There's no sequence of steps that you have to follow in certain orders. Let's see. So I think this is pretty self-explanatory here on how these different inputs in this section work. You'll see that we have individual start and stop times for each of the providers. And that's for your billing team, right? So they need to know, how is this case broken up? If there are more than 3 anesthesia providers on a given case, then we'll show you later how you can go up here and add an extra info page. I'm sorry, it's actually already here, where you can add additional providers, up to 7 providers for the same case. What are some other things? So down here in the procedures, here you'll see that you need to select the primary type of anesthetic, no surprise there. When you're entering in a diagnosis and or procedure code, we allow two different ways to do that. So if you click on the red field here, you're going to be required to select from a fixed set of a fixed list. If you want to just free text it like you would on a sheet of paper, then you can click on free text entry and you can type whatever you like. So let's do that. Let's click on the red one first. And then here you'll see there's this list. Whoops. You'll see there's this list to choose from of different diagnoses. You all control this at the facility to determine, hey, what are my top 100, 400, 500 different specific diagnoses that I'm going to use. For example, let's select a hiatal hernia, and when you do that, it'll automatically incorporate the appropriate ICD-10 code, again, to be sent off to your billing team. If you're of the culture and the practice to say there's no way that I'm searching through a list, then that's fine. You can do a couple things. One is you can click on the list. You can click on this gray box area here, and it will actually pull up your keyboard, and you can just start typing in hernia, and you will see that this list auto filters, and it makes hernia much quicker to choose from. So another place to enter it in is just to enter here on the free text entry. So if I click on that, then it'll just pull up a box. And then again, I can go to the keyboard and I can just say, hernia and hit accept. And if that's, and in that case, it's not going to include any dedicated ICD-10 code, right? Because it's free text. You're not sure what you entered. So we allow it either way. You can pick from a default list if that works for your organization or that facility, or you can just select free text. And then procedures, they work the same way. And so if I click on the list, you'll see here, there are a list of procedures to choose from, and you can just select any that apply, and then it'll include the appropriate CPT code. Or if that doesn't fit your practice, then we encourage you to just use the free text button to the side. And then when you do that, you can pull up the keyboard and, just type in whatever procedure you might have done. And again, when you do that, of course, there is no associated CPT code because it's free text and we don't know what you typed. Going down here for things like transfer to and protocol used, you went to the PACU. Yes, I used a handoff protocol. I extubated awake in the OR. That you get the idea of how you would fill this out. Moving up to the main grid section, you'll see this looks pretty familiar. Over here, you'll see a list of substances, and those are yellow, indicating their input fields. And then we have totals and wastages over here on the right side. You'll notice up here in the timeline, when we put our anesthesia start time, it automatically populated that for us. And if you end up running a long case and you need to add an extra time page, you'll see that on the extra time page, it just picks up and carries the same, the next 3 hours, if you will, for you. So again, little tricks to try to speed this process up. So when you're down here, you can either select each of your medications one by one. And, we have a list of medications to choose from over here. You can pick what your favorites are. You can look at the entire formulary. You can click in the box up here and again, use the keyboard to auto filter to find your medication. Probably the fastest way to do it though is to use templates. And so up here in the templates, you'll see you have a fully customized list of templates. We'll work with you before go live to make sure these are where you need them to be. In this case, let's just say we're doing a general cuffed endotracheal tube. And so when I click that, you will see that it adds a list of my medications and provides basically any field on this form. A checkbox, a radio button, a drop-down value can be set with the use of templates. And so you can see it adds all of my medications. And this is a real important trick in how it makes kind of our platform unique. Is at this point, you'll start writing like how much you gave with your pencil. And so for propofol, for example, let's say we gave 150 propofol, and then we gave another 50, and then maybe out here we needed 10, and then we needed 20. This is not discrete. This is all handwritten, as you can see. What is going to be discrete is the total. So when you go to the end, you're going to say, okay, I gave 230 milligrams and I wasted 20. And when you type that in, that's the information that is going to be available for pharmacy reports. It's going to help with narcotic reconciliations. It's going to help with tracking the wastage and giving reports to the pharmacy team to compare what was actually used versus what was checked out from the Omnicell or the Pyxis or whatever machine you might use. So this balance that you see here of some handwriting with some discrete field, lots of thought and time has gone into its design to really make this intuitive as possible for any anesthesiologist or CRNA. And then of course with vital signs, you again record them just like you would on a sheet of paper. So whatever type of marks that you might actually use, you would do that on the form. And then anything without a yellow field, you would just handwrite like you would on a normal sheet of paper if you would. So, MAC 3, grade 1, stylet, you get the idea. Entitled CO2, yes, we're supine, and we tape the eyes. So the things that are handwritten are not going to be available for reports, but they will be recorded on the form for medical legal reasons, so you know what happened where. The stuff that you're going to report are dates, times, who was involved with the case, what cases were specifically done, et cetera. And now you'll see down here in the box, because we know who the surgeon is, who the anesthesiologist and the CRNA are, I can now run reports that look at first case delays and find out which surgeons are responsible for the most minutes that are lost for the most cases, which anesthesiologist, which CRNA. When you have these timestamps of anesthesia start, anesthesia ready, surgery start, surgery end, I can do the same kind of reporting for different intervals where I'm looking at what's the average anesthesia ready time between all of the anesthesia providers. How does that distribute across the group? What kind of service are we delivering to our surgeons? And I can do it for the surgical prep time, the total surgery time, the emergence time. I can start looking at turnover times between cases. It's not just wheels out, wheels in, but it's also the surgeon close to the surgeon cut time. That's their perception of the efficiencies. You can also look at anesthesia turnover time, the anesthesia in for case 1 and the anesthesia start for case 2. And through analytics and knowing those numbers, you get a great visualization of where are our efficiencies and where are areas that we can work on, right? So that it gives you an idea of how each one of these pages work. We showed you the extra time page. This is an extra info page. So down here, your post anesthesia assessment. We make things quicker by using some macros. So, if everything's normal, you can use this normal button and all these questions are going to get answered appropriately. To enter in your vital signs, you'll click on like blood pressure and we'll say it's 120/80. And then for these other vital signs, we'll say that we were setting 100. We had a heart rate of 72, respirations of 16, and we were 63, 36.7. And so pretty quickly, you now have all of this information done for your post-anesthesia assessment. We need to know who you are. So when you'll put in your identifier, and then here, as you sign, it will automatically add the date and timestamp, again, making it faster than an actual sheet of paper. For more complex cases, you're going to do some extra procedures. So up here, we have space for arterial lines, for central lines. Down here, we keep track of your neuroaxial blocks. And so here, if you were to select a block and say I did a continuous lumbar epidural, then you'll see all of these other red fields are now going to come up. I need a start time for your epidural and then an end time so that we can produce reports on how long did it take to place the epidural. Your billing team will know, was this block done out of surgery time? So was it done before anesthesia start time or during the case or after the case? It's important. What was the indication for that epidural up here? And then, some information that, our forms are used, thousands of cases per day. And so this is what our platform generally supports out of the box. But if you need some customization to it, it's always possible. We can customize any of these forms at the end of the day to make them whatever you want. But we do know that these work very well. For medications, very similar pop-up where you see all of the different types of medications you might want to use for that epidural, and then the amounts, the units, and the routes. And then here you can record the time and the wastage of each of those medicines in case you're using an opioid. And then again, an ID box and a signature box. If you're going to do a regional block, then you want to add an extra page. We call that a regional page. And when you add that, you'll see here that these are two identical columns to each other, allowing you to do 2 blocks on one sheet. And when you zoom in here, pretty self-explanatory. Again, you'll click on the block, And you'll see a whole list of here, fully customized to your facility and what kind of blocks that you want to do. Let's just say we did single bilateral tap blocks. And when you select that, you'll see again, it wants to know the start and end time for that specific procedure, the indications for it. If you turned out that you used ultrasound and you say yes, then here you'll see the appropriate CPT code for the procedure performed, and then the ultrasound modifier for that procedure. And again, all of those codes are automatically generated and available to be sent to the billing team. You can also take a photo. Here, I'll show you. We'll take a picture of my keyboard. Hit accept. We'll say use photo. So you might take a picture of either a printout from the ultrasound machine, or maybe you just want to have someone else using the iPad and just take a picture of the actual ultrasound machine. That would also work, but this shows you how you can get very quickly the image directly into the EMR, and you can take a picture of anything. For example, we have another page that's called photos and comments. And so if there was something you wanted to take a photo of, then this form allows you to take 3 different photos. And then over on the right-hand side, you can write anything you want, right? So anything, and then point arrows and document anything that you might, want to take a picture of. Maybe it's a physical exam finding, maybe it's an interesting EKG, whatever it might be. This allows you to take pictures of anything. Some people want to take pictures of the monitors. We have some folks that want to take pictures of face sheets. There's different things, different reasons you might want to take a picture. Finally, our last page of the form is our macro page. This is where your macro compliance is. And you'll see there's already some information here filled out for you. And that's because it's just copying it from the other pages. There's no duplicated data entry when you're on the iPad. You fill in the data once, right? There's no claim ticket. There's no macro compliance form. You just do your documentation one time on the iPad. And then I'm telling you, all of the data, as long as all the red fields are gone, all of the data you need to have a complete form is going to be taken care of. You will see fields that are missing are like anesthesia end time. Well, that's because we didn't put them on the primary page. I skipped that over for the demo's sake. You'll see down here that it was automatically, first case delay was automatically checked to yes. And that's because, remember, we said the case started at 140, was supposed to start at 140, but it didn't start till 145. So the system already knows this is the first case delay. And here are some, reasons that you're going to want to check to make sure you can track why our case is getting delayed for the reporting folks. Same thing for case canceled. This whole middle column is for macro measures, pretty self-explanatory if you're familiar with how macro measures work. One of the services that use with all of our forms is we automatically send out surveys on your behalf. And this is how you control it. So down here on this question, if you say yes, send Graphium survey, then we use information from the ADT feed and send out a hyperlink via cell phone and email address to ask them, I think it's 7 or 8 specific questions about their anesthetic experience. And then again, the individual answers for each one of those questions is then surfaced in the dashboard so that you can look at your reporting and know how well is each individual provider in your group being received by the patients. What is the perception? How is pain controlled? Did they answer my questions? Did they treat me with respect? Did they spend time with me? Things like that that are very specific to not only AQI 48, so we can report to macro, but also are important for your marketing, right? So when you go on to protect your existing market share or go out for new market share, you want to be able to say our patient satisfactions are X, and we have the data to back that up. So really, really handy information there. And then we have some additional measures because we always know it's hard to get the 6 required measures for macro compliance. And then over here on the right, we have some quality measures. This is information that we use to make OPPE reporting possible. So it helps your hospital with credentialing and their certification burdens. Super easy to print out the reports on those fields. And then down here, we have 39 or 40 different outcomes that we're looking at for every anesthetic. And, if you did have a complications, then you would just select yes, we did have a complication. And down here, let's just say we had an aspiration. And you can see it's pretty self-explanatory of what those are and what those mean. And then the ASA CPT codes, if some folks want to enter it in directly, then they can enter in that CPT code, or you might want to put that in by a template. And so if you're just an eye center or a GI center that only does 3 different procedures total ever, then let's set up the template that automatically includes the correct ASA CPT code so that your billing team then doesn't even have to enter it in, and it provides them some efficiencies as well. And so that's about every page. I think with this limited kind of understanding and how they work, anybody could pick this up and start playing with it and very quickly understand how it works, and the different fields and how they work. This is a pre-op page. We haven't gone over it, but again, I think it would be pretty self-explanatory. Here's something of interest. If you back out of the app, here you'll see our encounter. You'll see this is John Adams. This is the case we've been working on, and you'll actually see this orange bar down here is actually a bar graph telling you the percent this form is actually complete. And so here you'll see, I don't know, is that 80, 75% complete. If I were to go back into the form, and I'll show you, we'll just complete a couple of extra fields here. So let's just put in an ID. Let's put in a signature. Let's go over to the primary, and let's see that here's the consent page. We'll consent, the patient signed. We'll say that the anesthesiologist's turn now to sign, and they sign it. And you'll see the date and times come over automatically. Maybe up here, let's initial evaluation done. First vital signs prior to induction done. And then why don't we put in anesthesia ready? And how about an anesthesia end time, which is over here. Say +2. So we filled out, I don't know, 5 or 6. You'll see here that it's staying red because it wants to make sure that at least one of your providers has the same end time as that anesthesia end. And so did I put 22 or 23? I can't recall. It's 22. Okay, so here you'll see that it flagged me as to saying, hey, don't forget to put in your individual provider IDs. And now if I go back to the chart, you'll see that it's a little bit more complete. And so anyways, that's another visual cue that you have not completed that form, because it's the bane of any anesthesia group's operations, is we have to have complete forms with legible data so that we can do what we need to get everyone paid and patients taken care of in a safe manner. And so as soon as this is done and 100% of the fields are all complete, there are no red fields remaining, this bar graph will reach 100% completion, and then this whole line will turn green. And then you'll know that form's complete. When it's time to add another form for another surgical case, you'll click up here under add form, and you'll see we have our platform and our company have a variety of different forms for different use cases. The ones for anesthesia EMR are brief, general, OB C-section, OB labor, a short form, and an out of OR form. And the out of OR form, they all work in similar fashions. The out of OR form is geared to pick up things like emergency intubations, peripheral IV starts, anything that you're doing outside of the OR, post-op pain rounds, your chronic pain service or acute pain services that might be rounding and need to file E&M codes, they would use an out of OR form, which is a little bit different than the anesthesia forms, but the user interface works the same way. And then we have other people that just want charge capture solutions, or they just want macro solutions. That's what those other forms are. But if you click like a brief form, it'll automatically open up that form, and you will then see that it's brief. It's made for very short cases. So all of your pre-op is here. There is no pre-op page. This is all of the pre-op. Think of like a pain clinic where they're just doing, facet injections, and they're very quick. Down here, you'll see the same grid, just shorter amount of time. And then over here, you'll see all of the PACU post-anesthesia assessment. So everything condensed down to one page. And then the second page is your same macro form that'll get auto-populated as you complete that primary form. So gives you an idea of different form types. It's a very paper-like experience, very customizable to each of your facilities in controlling value sets, controlling templates, controlling which fields are required when. That's part of the onboarding process to make sure that the forms that we have made work for hundreds of other clients before you will also work to service your needs. And we have a good track record of doing that. If you back out of the form entirely, you'll see a list of all of your encounters, so you can open up any patient chart. Up here, you'll see this barcode scanner, and if you click on that, you'll simply click scan your patient's wrist barcode, and it will automatically open up that patient's chart or prompt you to create a new chart with that patient's information. So very quick to use. And I think John, if you have any questions or thoughts, or if I missed
No,
anything, that was a lot pretty fast.
I think that was a really good overview. It was, I think it kind of goes to show that there's an awful lot that we can do with these forms to satisfy the needs of your practice, and this is really what we're accomplishing in this first meeting, right? So we're sitting down, we're going to go through everything that Jeff just went through to make sure that your clinical POCs really understand what they're getting, and more importantly, how to explain it to their colleagues, right? Because once we have our forms done and those clinical POCs have gone through this, they understand everything you need, we load that into your instance, then maybe a couple of weeks later, depending on when integration gets done, we do circle back around to Dr. Zavaleta. We do that train the trainer, right? But this time you have the iPad in your hand, right? You are now looking at what is in your instance, right? And we're really going through how you can explain this to your colleagues, to really get there before that on-site go live when we're actually physically there. So what are some of the other questions that you ask, in this first introduction to a new client of, hey, what forms do you need? What do you want? That kind of stuff.
Yeah, I would say, let's take 3 or 4 top questions. The first is, which forms do you need? Right. So if you're a GI center or a surgery center, you probably do not need our OB labor or OBC, our OBC section forms, right? If you are, depending on the types of cases you do, you may just want the brief or just the short. We will send you packets of all 5 forms so you can look through them and say, which of these 5 do you want? There's no extra charge. You have as many forms as you'd like. For the brief form, there is no separate pre-op page. The short form is a little bit shorter than the general form, right? So we started with the general form and people said we want a shorter version. So we made a short form. And then people said we want an even shorter form. So we made the brief form, right? So those are the 3 different sizes trying to map to different cases. As far as what goes into the form, the hardest part I would say getting is, what are your top diagnoses you want in your value set? So we'll work with your billing team or ask you to work with your billing team to say, give us the top 100, 400, 500, 1,000, whatever it is, just give us the most, because there's a lot of efficiencies for your billing team if you can just get the CPT code correct on the front end. And the same with the same with the procedure and the diagnosis, right? So if we can get the right ICD-10 code to justify the appropriate CPT procedure, that's great for the billing team. And super easy to do if you can just train your crew to use the value sets appropriately and they map to what we're actually doing. So a value set showing the appropriate, most frequently used diagnoses, and another value set showing a list of the most frequently used procedures. Otherwise, our forms have just been used so many times by so many groups. We kind of have a good idea of what formulary is going to be successful for you, what list procedures you need in your regional drop-down lists that are most commonly used. What is going to be needed in trying to think the other value sets that we need, what locations you practice at, and when I mean locations, I mean OR1, OR2, OR3, plus we have Endo 1 and Endo 2 and Cath Lab 1, right? So what are those names for those locations, and we can import them. It's important to know that all of these lists that we mentioned, you can edit at any time through the dashboard. And so it's not like a one and done kind of thing. We just up front want to get you in a spot that's going to make you successful out of the gate. But later on is say, hey, there's this new diagnosis that we need, or a new procedure that we need, or a new regional block that we don't see in our list. You just go into our web-based dashboard and you add that, and then suddenly it'll appear in those drop downs. And so that's medications, regional medications, surgeons, anesthesiologists, CRNAs, all of those things are controlled through the dashboard. So it's the smartest sheet of paper I think you're ever going to come across, and the power that it brings to you in a user interface that is not intimidating. And I could not stress enough how important it is that the technophobic folks really are scared on onboarding. And John, you've seen this time and time again.
Oh, yeah.
By within 30 minutes, they look at it and suddenly you see their guard drop, they take a deep breath, and by the middle of the first day, they're smiling and saying, I can do this, because it's just not intimidating. It's very simple to use. And that's the idea, is how do we stay out of the way? How do we make sure we look like something that's very familiar? And I don't want a keyboard and a mouse and a monitor. We don't want you to turn your back to the patient. We want this thing right on the bed next to the patient, doing your documentation with your right hand while you're masking with the left hand and being fully engaged in healthcare. So that's the goal. I think those are those I think are the most frequent questions we come across.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like, on onboardings, the the app gets out of the way very quickly, and it just becomes that piece of paper that's in front of you, that smart piece of paper, like Jeff said. That it really does gets believers into the system very quickly. And if there was any naysayers, they're the ones that end up loving the system, right? But it's also why it's really important that we do this early, going through the forms, make sure that your clinical points of contact, really know what this form is, what it's doing for everybody. And really understanding. Also, Jeff talked about, one of the things I want to bring up is we can do edits, we can change things on forms. It just depends. Definitely don't give us a sheet of paper that you have now and say, here, digitize this. That's definitely not how it works. We definitely don't want to go there. And we also want to keep an eye on how fast you want to get going to an onboarding. We don't want to have huge edits on a form that we know works really well, but we do want to make sure that it works well for your workflow.
Yeah, that's a good point, John. What happens time and again is a group will come and say, well, here, digitize my form. And then we say, okay, because we've been down this road one too many times. And then we come back and say, you realize you're missing certain fields that you need for certain goals like macro compliance. And they'll say, okay, we'll add those fields. Well, okay, well, you're also missing fields that are important from an operational standpoint that allow you to justify your stipends or to go get new market share or to tell the surgeons, your perception doesn't line up with the data. And they say, okay, add those fields. And as you start going through this iterative process, what you see is that their existing form that you just digitized will suddenly start morphing into the form that we started with to begin with out of the package. And so that's why it's really important to say, hey, I know there's going to be some change, but give it a second. And what we try to do is say, just use it for 2 weeks. We will circle back with you, I promise. And after 2 weeks, you will start understanding why certain things work the way that they do. We even have customers that say, no, change that. It absolutely won't work. And so we go through that, we make the change. And then John, 30 days later, they say, hey, we need that to act the way it did before we told you to take it away. And so like, sure. So, it's a waste of everyone's, time. Right. And so we stress, here are the forms, just use them, understand how to use with a pencil. What we can't do, and John, you've seen this before, is it's difficult to send PDF copies to somebody who's never seen the software because they get intimidated by the PDF, not knowing how zoomable fields work, how dropdowns work, how templates work, how extra pages work. They'll just say, hey, I don't need an 8-page form. That's fine. You don't need that. Use the brief form. It's only 2 pages. So it's important to marry both the form, the PDF printed form, with how does the software actually work.
And I think that's crucial in this onboarding process. I think I bring up in a couple of the other videos that, like, when we get to form development in that kickoff call, all we're really trying to do is establish a couple of things and who those clinical POCs are, right? Because we want to get them on the phone with you for a much longer, more exhaustive call of the forms, right? Because after that call, it's like, oh, they get it. They're like, oh, I see. This is the form that I want. This is what's going to work for us. And it's a much better starting point. Yeah, you send people PDFs, and it doesn't make sense if you're not seeing that piece of paper in its piece of paper digital form. Right?
That's right. That's right.
Okay. Also, important to point out. Yes, we can change lots of things, but you definitely don't want to go there too far because you start to increase your cost and time to implementation. Right. You don't want that kind of stuff. So minimal changes is always the best. Use it for a couple of weeks, and I guarantee we're always going to make it work for you.
Yep.
So, great.
I appreciate it, John. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Jeff. We'll talk to you soon, I'm sure.
All right. Take care.